Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. The media only covers the border when they can show America being mean. And that is the topic of today's special. We're going to talk all about the border. We got some amazing guests coming up. But here's an example of what I mean here. They only talk about the border when they can prove that America is awful and evil and terrible and just plain mean. Do you remember this picture that went around? I remember when I first saw it, I thought it was fake. I thought that was like a fake picture. It's not. It's real. It's surreal, though. Isn't that a surreal picture? Like, what is happening there? Well, it made the left freak out. So you got to think, how do people interpret that picture? No one has any proper context to make sense of it at all, right? You don't know anything. Anyone who looks at that picture knows nothing about what's happening. So it's all based on emotion. And what people on the left see, or I should say, where the unthinking emotional part of their brain takes them, is mean white guy, like cowboy, right? It's like stereotypical central casting mean white, almost like the mean settlers who killed the natives, like Trail of Tears style white guy on a horseback. Mean white guy hurting black person, and the horse is being mistreated too. So it's all just mean. That picture is mean. And in the pagan culture that we live in today, the highest virtue of all is being nice. That's it. All you gotta do is be nice. You don't even realize to be nice. You just have to be nicer than that other guy. But you gotta be nice. Nice is the pinnacle of achievement. You gotta be nice, which means the worst of all the sins is the opposite, to be mean. And that picture is mean. Here's ABC News covering it.
There are alarming images from the Texas border tonight. The White House pressed on them today, calling the images horrific. What were some Border Patrol agents doing? And all of this comes as the Biden administration now puts migrants on flights back home to Haiti. Kenneth Moten from Texas.
Tonight, this new video of Haitian migrants at the southern border, the chaos and despair. Images showing Border Patrol agents on horseback as they try to stop them from crossing the river into the U.S. The White House seeking answers.
I've also seen the video. I can't imagine what the scenario is where that would be appropriate. It's obviously horrific, the footage.
I can think of many scenarios where that would be appropriate. It's a border to a country is the scenario where that's actually appropriate. But look at these words: alarming, horrific, chaos, despair. I don't know who this person is, but their sentiment is repeated by many. Border Patrol mounted on horseback, rounding up Haitian refugees with whips. This is unfathomable cruelty towards people fleeing disaster and political ruin. The administration must stop this. So we have unfathomable cruelty added to the list. Now, we got to ask a couple questions that the unthinking brain does not. First, let's see the video. Right, pictures are very deceiving. So here's some video of the scene. A little less dramatic than the picture seems. Seems less vicious. And a little later in this video, you'll see it in a second here, you can see the guy on horseback using his whip. He's using his whip, as the media says, to hit someone with it. He never does. It's not a whip. It's the reins of the horse. And he spins it around. There it is. That was it. That was the scene. He spun it around because the guy was getting too close to the horse. So that's what you do. That's what they do. They spin the rein around for a minute. Like a minute, for 1.3 seconds if someone's getting too close to the horse. So our next guest is the former acting Secretary of Homeland Security. And we're going to talk to him about that scene right there. What those horses are, what it's all about, what's happening there. And where are they crossing exactly, where that's even a thing? And I got questions. And we're going to override the emotional part of people's brains. They're like, oh, that's mean looking. And get some answers here. But the idea that we should write our border policy based off of this looks mean is absurd. The media makes a practice of this all the time, though, right? Taking a picture and not giving you proper context. This is just recently one of a billion examples. The LA Times. This is during the recall of Gavin Newsom, or the attempt to recall. Look at that. So he's slapping her. That's Larry Elder slapping a woman. And the headline and the whole thing made it seem like Larry Elder slapped her. Okay, well, that turns out that woman was the woman who organized the event. Here's the, put the picture up one more time, guys, if you can. I just want you to imagine, this is why photographs can be so deceiving. So that's the scene, okay? That's the freeze frame, the split second that they chose to use is that split second. Now here's the video of what happened.
Welcome about us.
I have a great team to introduce you to.
Not amazing? Isn't that fantastic? Goes in for a hug, hands just for split second just happens to be right next to her cheek. And that's all. That's where they stop it and make it look like he's slapping her. That's how the media manipulates you all the time. And of course, the border is no different. The media ignores the border. They always ignore it unless they can spin it as some example of America being mean. If they can 1619 the border, they'll do it. And the fact that these are Haitian immigrants, so you get the juxtaposition of the white man and not only brown, but black even. Oh man, the media is going to be all over this one to talk about how evil and terrible America is. And they're even throwing Trump into the mix here, as if Border Patrol on horseback is some sort of Trump holdover policy or something that needs to stop, even though it's been like that way for 100 years they've been on horseback, right? Anytime they can portray America as being mean, they'll take it. It's not about border security, right? When the media finally comes around and talks about it, it's not because they're caring about the people, and it's not because they care about like the country. It's just because they want to make America look mean. Right? Remember, even back when they use images from the Obama presidency to prove how Trump was being mean. Remember that? Or AOC going to the border to cry outside of a parking lot. Right? What's the point here? The point is America's mean. Or this most recent border situation with the Haitians. Completely ignored until an image comes out that makes Americans look mean. That's the entirety of the left's coverage when it comes to the border. America's mean. And I don't even need to specify with the border. This is the great thesis of the left. This is the great thesis of progressivism. In America, we're mean, we're evil, we're rotten to our core. Look at the latest example. We're whipping people at the border. Well, we're doing nothing of the sort. And as usual, all we're asking for is order at the border. We are compassionate in this country, but you can't be compassionate in chaos. You can't be compassionate in an absolute, frantic, hectic, insane to control situation like at Del Rio, Texas right there. And the chaos is intentional. The left loves it. There's no other conclusion you can make when it comes to what's at the border, because it's always like this. We could fix the border. It's just a matter of will. And you look at these videos of desperate people and they make it our fault. Like it's our fault. It's our fault. We're being cruel. As if we should just let everyone in, no questions asked. Always. It's not sustainable. It's not a reasonable way of thinking. And don't think that our media really cares about these migrants. Don't think for a second that they actually care about the people who are being whipped. It's all about, it's a tool. It's all about making America look mean. Ignore the story for days, right? People have been suffering for days, doesn't matter. But once they can apply the 1619 project to it, then it becomes top news. Even though these people, America's so mean, but these people still give up everything to try to come here, which is also a weird thing. So Coming up, we have the former acting chair of Homeland Security. We're going to ask him first question: how did these Haitians get here? It's kind of far away. Then we're going to talk to a 32-year Border Patrol veteran who was the director of the area that includes the Del Rio sector. So we're going to get a ton of on-the-ground insight from him coming up next. First question: how did these Haitians get here? That's next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special Crisis at the Southern Border. I want to go right to our top guest who can answer all these questions for us. Chad Wolf, he's the former acting Secretary of Homeland Security and right now at the America First Policy Institute. Mr. Wolf, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Good to talk to you. I got to ask you the question. I think it's the number one question most people are asking is, how did Haitians, over 10,000, whatever the number has been, get from Haiti to Del Rio, Texas? That's kind of far, and there's an ocean in between. Can you map out the journey for us?
Sure. Actually, the vast majority of Haitians have left Haiti. They left them many years ago due to previous earthquakes, and a lot of them have resettled in Brazil, parts of South America, and even Central America. And so many of the Haitians that the Border Patrol are coming into contact with today actually did not originate from Haiti and cross the Caribbean into Mexico. They're actually coming up and flying into Mexico City from South America and then making that journey to the southwest border. And so, again, why are they doing that now? Because they know from the Biden administration, not only from messaging, but their policies, that now is the time to come to the border, because the odds are the likelihood of staying in the U.S., which is their goal, is far greater today than it was under the Trump administration. And if you don't know where the Biden administration is going in the future, you want to maximize your opportunity to get in and stay in the country today. And that's why you see the surge at the border. How they specifically got there is very similar to how the other 200,000 individuals in the month of August got there as well. Smuggling routes, trafficking routes, the cartels are facilitating their entry into the United States.
For a fee, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I got a ton of questions from that. That's such good information. Okay, so these Haitians have been in Central America, South America for a while now, maybe since like the earthquake. When was that? Like 2010 or so? How did they get even to those countries? Was that more of a, like, did they just get on airplanes and like, were they welcomed by the people of Brazil, the government of Brazil, or were they there? Have they been there illegally? Even the genesis of them getting to South America, how was that?
Well, again, you gotta remember that many of the countries in South America and Central America have different visa policies than the United States does. Some of them are more relaxed. Some of them have relationships with Haiti and with other countries in the region that allow individuals to travel between those countries with little to no visas at all. So you'd have to examine how they got to each and every country. My guess is that the majority of that is legal travel. But again, they don't have the same requirements as we do here in the U.S. For foreign visitors coming in, making sure that they have all their paperwork, visas, and the checks needed. Now, once they get to Brazil or South America, the question is, why are they coming to the U.S.? And so it's a variety of different questions, but I think the biggest pull factor right now is their ultimate goal is to get to the United States at some point. And they see that the Biden administration is letting in 200,000 individuals a month come into the United States. So they're taking their chances now, and they're trying to push here. And again, these folks are not asylum seekers in the truest sense of the word. They will likely never qualify for asylum. They're here for jobs and economic prosperity, which I understand, but they're abusing the system in order to get here.
There had to be some sort of trigger, though, because I would understand if just general Haitians came up over time. But this is a mad, acute rush into one place, right? So there had to be some trigger. I remember Ted Cruz a while back talking about some policy that Biden said he would not deport Haitians, and word spread. Is there truth to that, or what do you know?
Well, there's a variety of different things that are going on here. So if you recall, at the beginning of the administration, DHS actually put a moratorium on all deportation flights. So these flights that you hear about now back to Haiti or back to other places in South America and Central America, they all but stopped at the beginning of this administration. So word got out. And that's why you see numbers of migrants coming to the border in larger numbers each and every month. They also relaxed enforcement priorities here in the U.S. So even if you're a Haitian and you get past the Border Patrol and you come into communities and you're encountered by immigration enforcement officials, the Biden administration precluded them from deporting these individuals back to their home country. So there's a variety of different reasons on why they would want to come now. The thousands of folks that you're seeing, on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande and trying to get over, this is an organized attempt, whether it's done through a human trafficker, a smuggler. They didn't all come together. This is an organized attempt, and it's really on the Mexican government to help stop some of this. The Mexican government knows that these individuals are crossing at this point in the river. They see thousands of them congregating. They have no legal right to cross there. They need to cross at a port of entry. They can stop this. They can take action. They're simply not doing so.
I definitely want to get to that now. How did all of these Haitians even get into Mexico? If they came from Brazil, which is pretty far away from Mexico even, right? That's quite a trek. How did they even get into Mexico?
Well, it's smuggling routes. They come in through the southern border of Mexico and make their way all the way through Mexico. We see it. It's not unique, unfortunately. We see this every single month where in August and July, you had over 200,000 illegal apprehensions at that border. And so they're all coming up through those smuggling and trafficking networks. And that's the issue. We need the Mexican government to do vastly more than what they're doing today. When you see 2,000 Haitians congregating on the Mexican side of the border not at a port of entry, Mexican law enforcement needs to step in and move them away and bring them back to a facility, needs to question them. Where did they come from? What are they doing there? Do they even have visas to stay into Mexico, or they're, the right paperwork? There's a variety of things they could be doing. They're simply not doing that because I don't believe that the Biden administration is putting enough pressure, enough leverage on them for them to do their job.
What kind of leverage did Trump put on Mexico? Trump's all about always getting the upper hand and always having leverage for the business background. So what specifically did he do with Mexico?
So we did a couple of different things. He got on the phone. He talked directly to the Mexican president. But we also had Mike Pompeo and other officials at the State Department say very clearly that, look, if you don't do your job, then the amount of resources and foreign aid that we provide the government of Mexico, that could stop, that could shut down. We need you to do more for American security with the resources that we give you than what you're doing today. And over time, they understood that. The Mexican Protection Protocols, our MPP, our Remain in Mexico program, actually incentivized Mexico to do more. Because when these individuals showed up at the border, they waited in Mexico. Well, Mexico got the sense over time that they didn't want all these individuals staying in Mexico. That was bad for them, just like it's bad for the United States. And so they were invested in stopping this flow and stopping these individuals on the southern border of Mexico before they even made it into country, because it put an extreme amount of stress on their social programs, on their infrastructure, just like it does here in the United States. So with doing away with MPP, the Mexican government is now just letting these individuals process through and pass through Mexico because they know they won't stay there in Mexico. They will eventually end up in the United States, and it will be up to us to deal with it and not them.
Oh, man. I remember I did a segment a long time ago about foreign aid. It's kind of the first time I ever really thought about foreign aid and why are we giving so much money to other countries? And the best argument, I think the only argument really for it, is we have leverage over the country now. But that leverage, that aid doesn't do any good if you never use the leverage, right? So we're just giving money to Mexico and we're never using it to do anything to our advantage.
Well, that's exactly right. And President Trump understood that very clearly. And so, again, during the 4 years, we used that aid to make sure that they weren't only investing in what they needed, but also what was good for the security of the United States.
Can you tell me about the horses? We did the first segment of this about this horse picture, the Border Patrol whipping the people coming, the Haitians coming across. So that, of course, they weren't whipping anybody, but it looks mean, Chad. It's all very mean looking, and that's a terrible thing to the left. So, what do you know about horses and general border protection
So Border Patrol uses horses, mounted riders there on a variety of different terrain along that southwest border, particularly when you're looking at a river, situation where I'm sure there's going to be mud and vehicles are going to get problematic there. So you're going to need horseback. I'm sure they have ATV in the area as well. But again, look, we hire and we train Border Patrol to do one thing, and that's to interdict individuals coming across that border illegally and to stop, illegal narcotics from coming into the country. And you got to remember that these Haitians, when they walk across that river, and I think we've all seen those images, they are breaking the law. They're breaking the law in the United States. They don't have a right to be here. They have no legal reason to be here. And the Border Patrol needs to do everything that they can to make sure that these individuals don't try to abscond, don't try to run away into the interior of the country, that they all stay together. And I think what you don't see there, some pictures, and my sources are saying that some of those Haitian were actually trying to grab the reins of the horses because they wanted to get away, because they didn't like what Border Patrol was doing to them, law enforcement was doing. And so, we need to make sure that all the information's out there. I saw the DHS secretary talk about how he was horrified at the images. That is wholly inappropriate to make any comment until all the facts are in, until an investigation is done. Again, you're sending a very poor signal to your law enforcement. DHS has over 80,000 law enforcement officers. And if the first thing you're going to do is side with a bunch of pictures taken from whoever that don't show the full story, and not give your officers the benefit of the doubt that they were doing their job correctly, and that a still frame photo or even a little, few minutes of video did not tell the whole story, it's why the Border Patrol has lost complete confidence in the DHS leadership at this time.
That's a great point. We played a clip earlier of Jen Psaki saying she can't imagine a scenario where that's appropriate. So it doesn't matter what the facts are. There is no scenario where those horses are an appropriate use of force.
Yeah, well, that's because Jen Psaki's never been to the border. She's never stepped foot in what the men and women in green have to do every single day to control that border and to secure that border and to protect Americans. And Jen Psaki gets to talk, into a microphone behind a podium and take tough questions every day. But until she decides to go down to the border and walk a day in the life of those Border Patrol agents who are dealing with their 8th month of crisis in a row, folks back here in the administration or in DC, they're not living that every single day, both from a humanitarian crisis, a COVID crisis, a national security crisis. These agents are dealing with it every day, taking it home every day. And to say that for her to make those kind of comments just tells you the type of animosity I think that this administration has towards law enforcement, and specifically towards the folks that are trying to secure our border.
Absolutely. Chad Wolf, he used to be the acting Secretary of Homeland Security. He's now at the America First Policy Institute. Chad, awesome to talk to you, brother.
All right, thank you.
Have a great day, man. Coming up next, we're going to talk to someone 32 years Border Patrol, and he was actually in charge of the area of the border that includes the Del Rio sector. So we're going to get some more specific on-the-ground focused on Del Rio analysis coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special Crisis at the Border. So we just got a great macro look at big policy from the Biden administration and all that stuff. I want to get micro here. I want to look on the ground, specifically in Del Rio, Texas. And there's no better person to talk to about this than our next guest, Randy Clark. He's a 32-year veteran of Border Patrol, and he served as the division chief for the Border Patrol in the Del Rio, Texas area. And he's a reporter for Breitbart, Texas. Mr. Clark, how are you, sir?
I'm not bad, Mike. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for your service, and thanks for giving us some insight here. Tell us about Del Rio, Texas. All I understand, it's a small town, 35,000 people, and we have 10,000 plus immigrants coming in one quick sector. But tell us about the town, and tell us about the topography and the area around it.
Well, it sits right across from Acuña, Coahuila, Mexico, which is a small town as well. Del Rio has one hospital to service those 35,000 people that are residents there, and accommodations are pretty limited right now. So we've got a surge of law enforcement coming in to try and deal and handle with this situation. There's just really not enough hotels to accommodate them. This is a crisis like none that I have seen before, and we've had our share of migrant caravans and overcrowding issues, and we pretty much resolved those in 2019 through policy. Those policies are no longer around, and our government at least has sent out an open invitation for folks to come and to present their asylum claims, and they heeded that invitation, and they are here in mass.
Yeah, in 32 years, have you ever seen 10,000 plus people at one point of entry?
Never. We've seen high volumes before, but we have never outdoors, in an outdoor setting, detained 13,000 to 15,000 people, and that's the fluctuation that this camp has been at. I traveled to the area over the weekend several occasions. I observed closely, and you would not believe this is American soil if you could see the conditions that are there in that camp.
Yeah, and I say point of entry. Is this a point of entry, or like what's the wall situation here, and is there any legal crossing at this border point, or is this not even a border point?
Well, so there isn't a crossing now for folks like you and I that may need to go to Mexico because that bridge has been shut down. That is an international port of entry, and people by the thousands cross through there every day. Commercial vehicles, trade and travel, visitors, shoppers, they're no longer allowed to coexist with their sister city in Mexico. There's a lot of United States citizens and legal permanent residents that live in Acuña, Mexico, and travel to Del Rio to work. They're no longer able to do that. So it is a legal border crossing, but that is not how these people are crossing. They are crossing nearby by the hundreds an hour.
This image, you may see it here about them crossing this river here. What's this about? And what is that? That's not normal. Like, I'm sure that's not the normal way of crossing the border here. So what's that scene?
That's an irrigation weir dam to control the flow of the river in that particular area. It's very shallow, but it's a very narrow crossing. And what those people are doing, those are new arrivals, and they are also residents of that, refugee camp, if that's what you want to call it, that are going back and forth to get goods and come back to the camp, which is a matter of grave security for our officers there, because nobody's getting pat down. We do not know if they are bringing weapons. We don't know if they're bringing narcotics into that camp. We just don't know. There's no control because the numbers are that great down there.
So those are migrants going to the American side, getting supplies, and then going back to the camp.
No, the camp is in the United States. They have already made illegal entry into the camp, and they are traveling back to Mexico to get food, provisions, supplies, cardboard to build rudimentary structures.
Wait, I assumed they were still on the Mexican side of the border. The camp's on the American side?
Those are nearly 15,000 as of yesterday. I'm told the population is hovering around 13,000. They are on U.S. soil. They are building rudimentary shacks, and it's basically a shanty town on U.S. soil. Those are in the custody of the federal government. That's why they are being guarded. However, it is not a detention setting. We cannot pat them down. It's too dangerous. The officers down there, God help them, they're just overwhelmed. There's no way they can figure out who's coming in and what they may be bringing back and forth from Mexico. Now, it's suffice to say the Texas Department of Public Safety troopers have cut that flow off, but they have found other crossing points. That is not the only crossing point in that area. So now they're going back and forth through deeper water, and that flow is still continuing.
Why did all these Haitians, which is an aspect of this we talked about in the last segment, but why did all these Haitians and the smugglers who led them along the way from Brazil all the way up to the border, why Del Rio? Because when I saw I didn't know I've never heard of Del Rio, apologies. I just assumed it was further south in Texas, but it's much more north than I anticipated. So why Del Rio of all the places?
Well, for whatever reason, there are no cartel battles going on in this part of Mexico. In years past, there was a lot of violence. And so they feel that it's relatively safe to come to Acuña, that they're not going to face any kind of cartel violence. In the Rio Grande Valley, per se, the cartel controls human trafficking a lot more closely than they do in Del Rio and Acuña. So they feel it's a safe area, albeit small. It cannot accommodate them, but they're coming nonetheless.
Interesting. Okay, so now that I realize they're on the American side, which I didn't anticipate, this makes this next question even more important. You're say someone's a resident of Del Rio, Texas, and 35,000 people, and you have 10 plus thousand, 13, 15, whatever thousand on your side of the border. What are the people of Del Rio thinking and anticipating and preparing for? What does this look like if you live there?
Well, it has a lot of people on edge there in the city because, like most of America doesn't understand what's happening in that camp. Some of them, this is out of sight and out of mind for them. They've cordoned this area off. This is actually behind an existing border fence. So it's a remote area. It's not directly adjacent to the city because the bridge sits a little bit further south of the city. So the residents can't get a look except the way the rest of America does. But they're feeling it because their grocery shelves are empty. Restaurants have had to close down because those 13,000 people have to be provided 3 meals a day. That's a lot of food and provisions and supplies. The federal government is shipping some of that in, but local restaurants are also contributing to the effort. This is a whole of government approach. You've got Texas, you've got Valverde County down there, you've got the city of Del Rio down there. They're even using school buses in some cases to transport those migrants to detention facilities when space becomes available. But those detention spaces are crowded also.
Wow. In the last segment, we talked about the failure of the federal government, but I want to ask you about you're just talking about stepping up. What can Texas law enforcement do? Because I remember a couple months ago, Governor Abbott talking about taking matters more into his own hands when it comes to the border. So what can Texas law enforcement do?
Well, they have positioned themselves in this area right now for security. They have blocked off that Weir Dam. They are prosecuting people for criminal trespass when it's on private property. This is not private property. Some belongs to the city of Del Rio and some belongs to Customs and Border Protection in the footprint of that fence and around that bridge. So they're limited in what they can do. And you've seen when they try to do something, the federal government will step in and say, immigration is exclusively a federal issue. And so I think the governor's trying the best he can to do something, but this is overwhelming everybody. This is a national problem, and it's not getting the attention from the federal government that it needs.
So short of the federal government saying we're shutting it, well, they're already in America. Well, so I guess the federal government could just kick them all back to Mexico or send them on a plane to Haiti.
And they are already flying them back to Haiti, but it's 2 flights a day. So you're probably at about 250 flying out a day from 13,000. If you do the math, you're looking at well over 2 months if you were to return them all. But the bottom line is there is not enough detention space to hold these people and remove all of them to Haiti. So that will not happen. They'll remove some. They'll be released into the United States. The vast majority of these more than likely will be set free.
Do they have like a protected status or something because they're from Haiti?
So for those that were physically present, they do have temporary protected status, but they had to have been in the country as of earlier. So these folks, it won't apply to them, but nonetheless, the conditions there are going to impact any kind of future asylum hearings because Haiti is already complaining about the first flights that left yesterday, that they cannot absorb these migrants because of the conditions there. And many of them have not lived in Haiti in several years. Many of them have children that were born in Mexico, that were born in Chile, that were born in other countries. So the families are of mixed nationality.
What a mess. Tell me about your guys at Border Patrol. What's the morale like?
Well, they're used to stepping up in times of crisis. To say that there's no morale issues, I couldn't do that. I know that they're taking this home with them. I've been to that camp, and I don't think I could adequately describe the squalid conditions that are down there. So they're coming home and they're having to deal with this. There's COVID issues. There's migrants there testing positive for HIV, for active tuberculosis, and they have to come home to their families. So they're worried. The morale has taken a giant hit, but those Border Patrol agents, the men and women down there, those from the state of Texas, those local sheriff's departments and police officers that are trying to help out with this mess, they're doing a fantastic job, and my heart goes out to them.
When you have an acute crisis at a certain point like this and you have to call in Border Patrol from really the rest of the border, how does that affect everywhere else?
Well, I think we've heard the argument that, the border is not open. It's it's more than open. It's actually wide open. The residents of all the communities, 100 miles on either side of this bridge, have no protection on the border. The Border Patrol checkpoints on the highway that are the last line of defense, they are shut down and they're closed. Local sheriff's departments outside of the area, they're finding migrants in open beds of pickup trucks, and they're on their own out there, and they realize that. There are no Border Patrol agents patrolling this 210 miles of border surrounding this port of entry.
If Randy Clark was president and had the authority to control the border and do whatever you needed to do, what would you do?
Well, I think the first thing, I would do is start to go back in time and reconstitute those policies and relationships we've had with other countries, where we look at this as a global issue, where we discourage folks from coming over because, look, life is not good in that camp for those migrants. This is the United States of America, and we can do better. We can organize, and we can do things logically. There's room in this country for migrants, but we cannot invite the whole world in a disorganized manner because people lose their lives out there. And this crisis is not over. So I hope we've seen the worst, but I fear, based on my experience, that we haven't. But I think we should have surged larger federal contingencies in here so that the state troopers can do their job on the highways and keep the rest of the community safe like they're paid to do. I think the Border Patrol agents should be on the ground patrolling this border and seizing the narcotics that are coming over and preventing any terrorists from entering, which is their primary mission. But this system has collapsed. So if I was king for a day, say, that's what I would do. I would reconstitute those policies and I would bring additional resources because this is not a local and state issue.
Sensible. Randy Clark, Breitbart, Texas, 32 years Border Patrol. Mr. Clark, thank you for your insights, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Well done. Tremendous. Mike Slater, Crisis at the Border. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special Crisis at the Border. Do not think for a second, do not be tricked or fooled for a second thinking that open borders is the compassionate thing to do. That is quite the opposite of the truth. I want to go to one of our friends, Jaco Booyens. He's an abolitionist. Right? You don't think there's any abolitionists anymore because slavery's over, right? No, not at all. Especially not at our border. He has dedicated his life to ending sex trafficking, particularly with children. Jaco Booyens. Jaco, how are you, brother?
Thank you so much for having me on. Always a joy.
As always. ShareTogetherNow.org. I want everyone to go there just right now. ShareTogetherNow.org. Let's start with Del Rio and Haitians. Is there anything fundamentally different when it comes to smuggling or sex trafficking when it comes to Haitians traveling across the border or El Salvadorians and any other part of the border? Is anything uniquely different about this than other sex trafficking, smuggling operations?
Look, it's got its own elements, but in general, it's the same crisis. But we got to go a little bit back here. We got to go back to the Bill Clinton administration and understand what happened in Haiti back then with human trafficking under that administration, and understand that Haiti has a bitter pill with the United States. And our current president basically said, come all, you're welcome, and we can take everybody. And the Haitians said, well, this is payback time. So we have to roll the clock back and understand what happened with the Haiti earthquake under Bill Clinton, and now understand that they're looking at this as payback. And they 100% believe that the U.S. will now, they'll find restitution, they'll find a safe haven in the U.S., and they're going to flood this border. Mike, we haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg yet. And now, of course, we see Haitians, being transported back to the border, taking a hold of a vehicle, basically fleeing into the country. So this is just the beginning, because we have a commander-in-chief that sent out the notion that the border is open and all are welcome and we can handle people. And so little history lesson here. They've been waiting. Haiti has been waiting for their day to get payback from the U.S., and here we are.
What and you got to jog my memory a bit. What did the Clintons do?
With the Haiti earthquake, we raised $4 billion in the United States for Haiti. Very little was done by the Red Cross at that time in Haiti. 2,500 children went missing. And if you go to Haiti, I've had 29 trips to that island. 29. If you go to Haiti in general and you talk to the orphanages, there's a bitter pill from the 2,500 children that went missing during that time. Now, Why did they go missing? They absolutely did. We know many of them went into sex trafficking. And so Haitians have been waiting for this moment to say, when will the U.S. finally step in and help us? And then our commander-in-chiefs basically said, now's the time. Not just for Haiti, but over 100 nations around the world are now sending people across our border. And so it's no surprise that Haitians are saying, it's our turn. It's our turn to be helped by the United States.
That's so interesting. So, all right, so I want to make sure I get this right, Jaco, because obviously I've never heard this anywhere. So you're telling me earthquake 2010, right?
Yep.
Clinton Foundation is and et cetera, saying we're gonna help you. We're gonna come in. We raised all this money. Isn't it great? Didn't do anything / made things worse, and life wasn't improved. So you're saying there's like a bitterness from the Haitian people. Again, so the mentality is, you owe us, America. You owe us now. Now we can finally get what you promised us 10 years ago.
There is no question.
Wow.
And again, 29 trips to the island. They look across the border to the Dominican Republic. They see business flourishing, business flowing, even under President Trump. We saw OPEC at the time. Now President Biden changed the name. We saw, Office of Private Investment Corporation going in and saying, we're going to work with the Dominicans. We're going to build commerce. And they're looking across the border going, there's food, we're starving. There's commerce, we're starving. And they've had this bitter pill in their pocket. I'm talking about the moms and the dads on the street. I'm not talking about just politicians. We're talking about people in the community that know what happened in 2010. When in 2010, the U.S. under Bill Clinton promised that they would come in and help Haiti with the Red Cross. And hardly a single Red Cross tent was ever put up in Haiti. $4 billion was raised, and their children went missing. They're saying payback time right now.
That's okay. So I got two questions. First, what do you mean children went missing? Second of all, you've been there 29 times. What kind of conversations are you having with people that have led you to this conclusion?
The reason we went onto the island, and it's one island, Dominican Republic and Haiti, was to rescue children. So over 400 children rescued, 40 brothels shut down. That's what we do. We rescue children. We help to defend families and children. So our conversations are always around children. We're talking with parents, and they go, you know what happened in 2010? 2,500 children went missing. Where did they go? They were trafficked. Some of the orphanages, and people said they would come help us. We have no trace and record where these children went. Some people from the U.S. came and took the kids. We don't know where they went. And many of the situations, it was not people from the U.S. who came and took the kids. Traffickers came in, because traffickers go wherever there's migration. Like, wherever humans migrate, sex trafficking goes through the roof, because they understand there's dysfunction, there's disunity, it's lawlessness. Look at our border. Pedophiles are flooding the border, both sides of the border. And so now Haitians are going to be, unfortunately, the child of choice, because they know the Haitian kid will literally abandon ship, away from home, nobody here, no refuge, because the president of the United States said we can keep every child safe that crosses this border. We can't keep our own foster children safe in this country. This is a debacle. We will reap from this for the next 10 years.
It's hard for people to fathom what you are living every day, what you're involved in every day. Because, I mean, the depths of depravity for pedophiles to flood the border, it's like, what are we even talking about here? Maybe people's only reference is like the movie Taken or something, where anyone can even pretend to begin to understand. Reno, you with me? But you're in it. You see this all the time.
I'll this is our daily. This is a daily life for us, right? So what I'm saying to you is that pedophiles understand human migration. I'll explain to you. We've got a big problem in the coffee industry, for instance, right now, right? Drought. When people move, pedophiles move. Where are people moving in the United States right now? Real migration, our southern border. So pedophiles are on this side of the border, on the other side of the border. The cartel controls the last 50 miles of the Mexico border. The amount of trafficking we're seeing at the moment is unprecedented to humankind in the history of the human race. This is the biggest conversation we should be having. And now I understand why the Haitians are coming. I understand the bitter pill they've been carrying since 2010. I understand that they truly feel like this is our moment to get our day in the sun. I don't blame them. How can you? If you look at that nation, it's poverty. It's third world. They're coming. Don't think it's going to stop. Not for a second is this going to stop. We do not have enough border patrol, enough border agents to handle this. I'm calling on our governor in Texas to say, look, it's time to kick the Fed out of Texas and just handle this with the Texas Guard and handle this ourselves. Because and if you want to do the humane thing, you would tell other nations, we cannot help your kids. We cannot house you. We cannot feed you. We've got nowhere for you to go. Because the traffickers are licking their chops. I'm sorry to be graphic with this, but they are. They're sitting this side of the border and they're saying, thank you, Mr. President, for bringing a fresh new supply. And you understand that a Haitian kid that comes into this country, we don't even know how to find that kid. There's no fingerprints. There's nobody looking for that child. That child is now a ghost in the system in the United States.
I want to emphasize this last point. We got about 2 minutes. I want to emphasize this. You say, X number of kids went missing with the Haitian earthquake because of the earthquake and the chaos that ensued. But now we're getting all these reports of all these kids who are missing in America when they come across the border and we send them off who knows where, some families or whatever we think, and then we never track them and whatever. So they're missing here. And I want you to emphasize that point about, because many people on the left who are open borders, whatever, they think it's the compassionate thing to do. Speak to that, please.
Number one, when you cross the Texas border, you're not in civilization. You're in the desert. So a kid crosses the desert. You've got a long way to go. Now you take a kid, you put him on a bus, you take him into McAllen, Texas, or all the way up to Portland. We're finding children in Portland at the moment, right? That child does not have a safe home. I do not care what the United States president is saying. We do not have American family. We do not have American families that can take all these kids in. We just don't, Mike. The reality is there's nowhere for them to go. This is not the Russian orphan system where you have 300 kids in an orphanage where you just stack them in an orphanage and then they cry, putting kids in cages, right? There's nowhere for these kids to go. They go to the street. They go to the pedophiles. They become street children in our nation. You look at Tent City, America. Do you know how many kids are now currently in Tent City, America, in Los Angeles, in Portland, in Boulder, Colorado? This is what I do every day of my life. We're seeing kids now flooding the border. We're tracking kids in Chicago that crossed the border 48 hours before, that are making it to Chicago. Kids on the street. They're not going to American homes. Please, Hollywood, show me where you're housing these kids. Show me all the children you're taking into your homes in Hollywood. Now you're feeding these kids. All the virtue signaling that's going on here from the left saying, oh, bleeding heart. The right thing to do is to have better foreign policy, to have the kids stay in their own nation, stay in their own countries. We cannot help them. We do not have the resources.
ShareTogetherNow.org, ShareTogetherNow.org. And I know it's hard to think about, and it's hard to think about. It's hard to think about this thing, but it's real. And I'm grateful for people like Jaco out there on the ground. Thank you, brother.
Appreciate you for giving us time.
Yeah, man, always. ShareTogetherNow.org. Don't let anyone get away with thinking or telling you that open borders are the compassionate thing and that America's a mean country. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.